You know, 2 weeks ago, my radio co-hosts and I took a look at the issues surrounding finding a new church, having to leave a church that you've been in for years, even decades, and what to look for, what questions to ask, what are the make or break issues in selecting or leaving a church. And I had tremendous response. I heard from folks as far away as Sweden and New Zealand, and the difficulty finding a church, well, it's global. Let me put it that way. I heard from a handful of people who were in the perfect church, just very, very few. But at least there was that kind of report that some churches are in fact teaching the full counsel of God, including eschatology or end times. Now, here's what people told me they had to flee from. They left because the gospel was watered down. Others said their church was moving from gospel preaching to social justice. Others said that there was the entrance of mysticism, contemplative prayer, centering prayer, breath prayers, lectio divina, Christian yoga. Many had to leave because of the New Apostolic Reformation. I'll say more about that in a minute. Kingdom now theology, the church will make the world perfect. They couldn't take that. Some who left because their church had blatant hostility to eschatology or Bible prophecy. There was a mocking of those who wanted to stand for truth, including biblical truth, and therefore they had to leave. Some churches were not condemning abortion. Others, I was told, were way too soft on gay marriage. The new mood in their church was, who are we to judge? I heard from Pentecostal people who were heartsick that their Pentecostal church was taking things too far and began promoting practices and teachers who were very off base, and particularly promoting Bill Johnson's Bethel Church in Redding, California. I also heard from angry people. Why was I picking on Bethel Church in Redding, California? Don't you know people are being healed there, I was told. And I was supposed to be honoring this outfit and not warning about it. And I'm going to say more about that in just a moment and even play a sound bite. That's just a quick sampling of dozens of emails I got. Let me just read one here, then I'm going to move on to the issue of Bethel in Redding, California. And this comes from a gal. She says, I'm writing to you about a very sad situation. She says, I have belonged to a church for 35 years, and it has been a beacon of light to our valley. It's the largest church in the town of 60,000. We got a new pastor from California. He's young and has little experience. Unfortunately, he brought in fragments of Kingdom Now theology, and she says, thank you for devoting a whole program on that back in January with Ron Rhodes. It has really opened my eyes. And she says, as a single woman who has been fully involved in this church and considered it my family, I have had to leave. In the last year, I have experienced some of the deepest grief I have ever known. Others are leaving the church as well for multiple reasons, most of them having been there for 30 years. The young people are flocking. On the other hand, I sent a letter to all 12 board members and the pastor telling them that I had to leave and why. She says, I was a missionary for 10 years, sent out by this church. I served in most areas of leadership. I am well known. I prayed that my letter to the board would be a wake-up call to them. One of the board members started asking questions and told the pastor that he wanted to discuss this theology with the board, but the pastor said no. I tell you this to thank you for being a watchman on the wall, and your ministry has greatly educated me. That was one response. And another one, this one, I loved your response as to one reason you could not attend a church, replacement theology. He says, I have been accused of overreacting for even caring about this subject. People don't realize that tells one a lot as to how they will stand on other subjects. This is a note I got from Sweden, and she says, the program I heard on Christian radio today about the church was so important to me. A person even here in Sweden trying to recruit me to her circle, and her favorite church is Bethel in Redding, California. What I see seems to be demonic, at least to my ears. Thank you, and I needed to get a tape for her from your program. Well, let's just stop. I've got another email or two I want to read, but let's just stop here and can consider the topic of Bethel Church in Redding, California. And I want to play just a short soundbite, and it's of Andrew Strom. and he has done some extensive research on this type of church phenomenon, because it's not just Bethel. That just happens to be a prominent one. There are many, many more doing the same kind of activity.
Hi, I'm Andrew Strom, author of the new 2015 edition of Kundalini Warning, False Spirits Invading the Church. And the main reason we've put out this new version of the book is because of Bill Johnson and Bethel Church in Redding, California. For years, Bill's wife, Benny Johnson, has been the senior co-pastor of Bethel alongside her husband. And this woman is into some truly weird New Agey stuff, reflexology, and much more. Benny Johnson herself put out this picture. She's lying, soaking on C.S. Lewis's grave. These are students from Bethel's School of Ministry, and they've been photographed around the world lying on the graves of dead Christian leaders. There's a teaching in some of these circles that you can soak up the anointing by lying on their graves. Here's Bill Johnson himself at the grave of the wife of Smith Wigglesworth, the famous healing evangelist. In 2012, the Bethel crowd put out this book, The Physics of Heaven, and the subtitle says it all. Exploring God's mysteries of sound, light, energy, vibrations, and quantum physics. Many Christian leaders, when they've read this book, say it is one of the most New Age things they've ever seen. The contents are unbelievable. Just the chapter headings alone are proof enough. Vibrating in harmony with God. The God vibration. Dolphin therapy. Quantum mysticism. Human body frequencies. What on earth is a major ministry like Bethel doing, promoting such a weird and mystical work?
Okay, grave soaking. Now, that's one of the reasons we bring up the topic of Bethel Church, Redding, California, in a negative way. In other words, you lay on the grave of a dead saint. C.S. Lewis, that's one of the graves that are cited here, lay on that particular grave, and the spirit of that dead person is to come into the body of whoever is laying upon the grave. Now, folks, if this isn't dangerous, I don't know what is. And yet this is one of the primary teachings that's going on in Bethel Church in Redding, California. It is not sound. Again, I had an email all the way from Sweden, and folks in her circle, Christian circles, was trying to lure this Swedish gal, Vicky is her name, I believe, into the circle of the Bethel Church, Redding, California. And I had others who chastised me for even naming Bethel as a church that I think we need to stay away from because of this kind of activity. So here's another email that I got. Julie says, I was never going to be caught dead in a church, so I'm truly amazed what God has done in my life. I am blessed as a new Christian to have been brought to a church that really teaches the Bible. Well, I'm happy too. At my first visit, they were going through Matthew line by line over 98 weeks, a great learning experience for me, who had no religious knowledge whatsoever, totally unchurched. We just started Acts and expect to be in Acts until the end of the summer. I love learning about God, but I realize I am a babe when it comes to Christian doctrine. So that was a good report. That was good news because someone is truly being blessed by their church that they are in. Another person writes, I appreciate you being able to help validate my concerns regarding the times we are in. I've been a part of a local church 15 years. I have always trusted the leadership, but lately have had some red flags that have caused me to do further research on my own. Just so you know, I'm in my mid-30s. I have found that my concerns have been shared primarily by people my parents' age or older, not my generation or younger. I have not had any formal schooling on theology or doctrine. The church I go to is Southern Baptist affiliated, but the team of pastors come from many different denominations. Our church is one of the biggest and most rapidly growing in our area with amazingly gifted worship and visual arts. And then the writer says, after the new year, our church's weekly sermons were based on the book they urged the congregation to read and study in small groups called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Peter Scazzero. I'm not sure if you are familiar with this book or author, and by the way, I'm not. My husband and I were urged to also purchase the devotional and workbooks to go along with it. Once we started, I became concerned with the terms contemplative prayer, contemplative spirituality, centering prayer. I started researching these more. I read in the back of the devotional book that the author recommends for anyone wanting more information on centering prayer to visit a certain website. I became very concerned when I started reading the information on the website. I watched the videos. It is very spiritual, but I did not find it to be glorifying of our one true God. That's just some of the response that I had from the program that we did 2 weeks ago, where we considered the various dilemmas that are found in the church today. And so many who want to find a spiritually sound church, and it's very, very difficult. Thankfully, there are some out there, but many have given up. Many are simply getting their church experience either online, on television, on radio, etc.